Hi, this is Jana Antoni from Create Your Tomorrow and welcome to the Spanglish World Networks on Single TV channel 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the Single TV app on the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. This app is free. Single TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs from 2016 forward. Today, I have an immense pleasure to welcome here my dear friend, Laura Ollinger, which is Nationally Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach, Elite Neurocoding Specialist, and Functional Medicine Certified Health Coach, and so much more than that. Welcome, Laura. Thank you for accepting my invitation.
Oh, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Thank you so much. So first, I know that you help parents and teenagers to boost the teenagers' confidence and self-esteem, reduce stress and anxiety, and find a manageable approach that transforms their teenagers and their homes. So what is your story? How did you get into this?
Yeah, definitely. So, I had a variety of things happen and it kind of all mixed together to create what I do now. So, we had some trauma in our family several years ago. My sister's son, who was 20 years old at the time, took his own life. His name was Adam. And that was a huge wake up call for me. But even before that, the mental health of teenagers had always been really a concern of mine ever since I heard about a documentary called Screenagers, way back when my kids were just little, toddlers. And I was just worried about their physical safety. They're not drinking, Drano or jumping off the playground and breaking an arm. But I'd heard about this and I realized that as my kids got older, I need to be more educated and more aware of what's going on just in the world as far as technology and social media. And so that was really, the background of it. And then also at the time around when my nephew passed away, my own daughter was having her own struggles in school. With the whole COVID situation, we all know that so many teenagers really didn't fare so well after that emotionally. She was very disconnected. She was cut off from seeing people. And it just for her developmental process was just really unhealthy. And I realized I had the education, I had the skills, I had the tools to be able to help. So that's how it all got started.
So what has started actually as an education to understand why this is happening and started with this Adam story. And I remember that in your beautiful, magnificent presentation when you spoke about the Adam and continued with your nephew and then with your daughter and transformed it actually into actively coaching to help teenagers in their ways, in their lives, in their what's going on in their head and emotional life. Is it correct?
Yes, that's perfectly said. Yes.
So I remember like one of the first slides of your presentation was a headline, how to raise teens without freaking out. I imagine that without freaking out is directed to parents, right? Because they have struggles to understand actually the behavior in teenagers, because in teenage age, and I think if I recall correctly, it starts around 13 years old, that the brain goes in very significant change and the behavior is unpredictable and the parents, they really freak out. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, it all depends on the person and the parent and the child and their relationship and what their own individual situation is like. But I think it's completely normal at some point to have this like freak out moment, whether it's an external, towards the teenager or just an internal kind of like thought of, oh my gosh, like this is hard, or I don't know how to do this, or how do I handle this situation? It just kind of like brings about so many big emotions for parents who they want to do their best and they want to help their teenager. But, this is a time where parents need to learn many skills if they don't already have them, which is, one would be to kind of start letting go a little bit and start letting their teenager make some decisions on their own, make some mistakes, because that's how teenagers learn and that's how they really develop motivation. Because you're not holding their hand anymore like you were when they were in first grade or second grade, helping them study their spelling words or whatever they had to do. Now it's up to the teenager to be able to kind of take the ball and run with it, because it's really, at the end of the day, it's their life and they need to decide, what kind of dedication and what motivation they're going to put into it. But the other part, really, that a skill I think parents, I see a lot that they struggle with, is kind of just emotional regulation and self-regulation, because that's the thing. We as parents we're busy and we're tired and we're stressed ourselves. And so if we are not taking care of ourselves, then we have less bandwidth to be able to deal with the crazy, highs and lows and ups and downs that our teenagers are experiencing. So we kind of need to get to a place of very kind of solid place and be able to, I always think of it as like a bubble, where if they're kind of like, having a freak out moment, then we can absorb that shock and we're not responding back to them with another freak out. Like if you have two people freaking out, that's a disaster. Yeah. So it's all about like staying calm, staying regulated, and just being able to deal with the situation as best you can.
Like the teenagers, they have all their emotional challenges and storms and hormones and everything inside of them, and then the parents have this emotional instability as well. It's these changes, and when they are both in the high level and they came together. Yeah. So what I'm hearing, and you correct me, is like the parents needs to, after years of taking care and some kind of controlling and be the hero from that for their kids, they need like to learn to let it go and let them figure out their own identity. Stepping back.
Yeah, I think that there's a balance. I think there's a real fine line, and I really do think it's a case-by-case basis. There are some kids that just need a little more help and a little more guidance for a little bit longer. They kind of want to stay back and they're not ready to make that progression. There's other kids that they're just ready, and the problem is the parents aren't ready. So then they're the ones holding them back, and there can become what I think is a little bit of an unhealthy dynamic when the teenager feels like they need to perform to get the love or acceptance of the parent. We need to really encourage our teenagers that what they're doing on their own is for them. And we will support you. We will love you. We will be there no matter what. But again, like I said, it's a fine line, because there are some kids that just haven't matured yet or developed those skills to really fly on their own.
Yeah. And I remember you were talking also about these 4 quadrats, the controlling parents and other side. So how the parents will find this balance to help them and not to control too much, or giving them a space and not too much either. So how do they find this balance?
I think that takes a lot of self-awareness, and maybe I'll explain those 4 styles just for the listeners to kind of understand what we're talking about. So it's very well researched, well documented. There are kind of 4 basic parenting styles, and I used a visual, which is these quadrants of healthy versus unhealthy boundaries, and then kind of love, and then a little bit of distance or lack of love. And so the top, we'll go top left, is what we classically call as like a helicopter parent. I've also heard a new term that it's like a bulldozer parent, where the kid kind of just wants what they want and the parent always says yes. They never say no. So they're kind of getting bulldozed by their kids. And that's the thing, is these parents are great. Like, they have great intentions. They just love their kid with all their heart, but they don't ever want to see them upset. They don't want to ever see them feeling left out of like a social situation. So they just say yes to everything at the
They don't
expense.
want to see, they don't want to see their kids fail, right?
Yeah.
Either they just don't want to see their kids experience any pain. It's not healthy. I remember I had some helicopter parents in my classroom as well. I remember that very, very good. Yeah. And they just, as much as we love our children, they need also to experience pain and experience to a failure to raise, right? To develop and raise.
Absolutely. And it's better for them to start having those little feelings of failure while they're young. You know, if we keep them in this little bubble and then one day they're an adult and they have pain, it's like, whoa, they don't even know how to handle it. They can't manage and they can't self-regulate because they've never had that practice. So it's almost really an act of love to let your child have some pain or feeling whatever that uncomfortable feeling is. And so these parents kind of, as far as what the quadrants are kind of lacking the boundaries. And that boundary is what we're just describing, the ability to say no, or the ability to really kind of have their child in that uncomfortable situation. And then the bottom left is, again, weak boundaries, but kind of low connection or low level of love. And these are parents who are very much avoiding the relationship. It might be because they're working so much. It might be because they're just socially checked out. They're always at the bar, whatever that might be, that's unhealthy, but it's really a very damaging style to children for as far as emotional development. I always like to give a pro and con to every style, because the thing is, we all are these different styles at different times. And I've even said, sometimes I find myself, have 4 of my own children. Sometimes I might be one style with one of my kids and another style with another one of my kids. So I'm really always checking myself about where I am. But, as far as this avoidant or checked out parent, maybe it's not the person at the bar. Maybe it's a person who is a brain neuroscientist, or they're a NASA space, and they're doing these big jobs, or they're in politics and they're just so busy that it's not that they don't love their children. They're just physically absent or emotionally absent, but that doesn't mean they're not a good role model for their child, or they're not setting some good examples, because they're kind of paving, a kind of vision for what their child's life could be like.
Yeah, and that's very beautiful what you just said, because everybody we all have these moments where we can be in each quadrant and be for some kind of amount of time, or in a situation, be this kind of parents or this kind of parents. So we are just not judging at all. It's we are all 4 quadrants, and the first step is actually self-awareness, right? To just to just pause and stop and ask, okay, what am I doing? What's the best solution? And I think the best solution is always connection to the child. They find a way to connect.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, and that's where kind of this is ultimately headed, which is then the bottom right is very, very strong boundaries, but low on the love and connection part. And so these are the parents that I say, my little symbol on my slide is a hammer. It's like these very like militant parents. They very much want respect. They want to be in charge, and they want their child to know that. And they really want their child to obey. And so it's all about this like rules and hierarchy. And it's very, very strict and lacking a lot of like warmth and connection. And these are the kids that have a harder time learning about their own feelings and their own emotions, because it's not being modeled for them by their parents.
Or it could create by children a resistance, like wanted to do exactly the opposite way that what my parents is trying to teach me, because it's too much, it's too hard, it's always hard work, right? And I can imagine the parents are doing it from love as well, because they want the best for their children, right? So the intention behind is always the best. It no matter in what quadrants you are, but the intention is always love. But sometimes the way is not the best. Right?
Totally. Yeah. I'm so glad you said that. And it's funny because, they say we end up, through our programming as children, that we end up parenting either just the way our parents did. We always say, oh, we won't be like our parents. We won't, but we end up becoming our parents. Or, occasionally people do flip flop, and I can see how the ones that are raised in a very strict household end up becoming the helicopter parent, because all they ever heard was no as a child. So all they will ever want to say is yes as a parent.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
So
It's
from one extreme where they have lived as a child to another extreme.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. So again, it's all about this healthy balance. And so then the last one, which is kind of the one we're shooting for, is the strong boundaries and the love and connection. And so they have proven, through all sorts of research that these are the teenagers and kids that end up to be, long term in their life, the healthiest, kind of emotionally healthiest people. And that doesn't mean these people aren't making mistakes. Like, these parents are in this kind of quadrant most of the time. That doesn't mean the teenagers aren't doing bad things or sneaking out or partying or whatever, like we don't want our kids to do. But it's, the groundwork is laid where it's very much about keeping them safe and protected. And there are some rules that are non-negotiable rules that the teenager is very well aware of. But, again, it's a teenager's job to kind of push against their parents, because they're testing those boundaries, because this is in a safe bubble of testing, where once they're out in the real world, they kind of lose that ability to have that safe cocoon of testing.
Yeah. So the secret is actually to set up some healthy boundaries, this non-negotiable rules, and at the same time create connections. I think most of the parents, I want two assumptions, but I would say that some parents would be okay to set up some healthy boundaries and non-negotiable rules. But maybe they can ask themselves, okay, how can I create this loving connection with my child that will come to me and talk to me, what's they bothering? Because this is often the problem with the teenagers, right? They just don't, they disconnect. Suddenly it was very strong bond, especially between mom and the child. And during the teenagers period, they are just disconnecting. Right? Teenagers don't like to share with especially with their parents, right? What's going on with this boy in the classroom, or this girl, and etc. So how the parents build this connection that is totally something new, what I can imagine what was before.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of infinite number of ways to build that connection. But the idea would be to kind of get out of judgment, like you just said. If the child is afraid to tell their parent about a boy they have a crush on, it's because they're afraid of that judgment, or afraid of what they'll say or do. And so, we're not trying to be their best friend. We're not trying to get them to tell us everything. In fact, I would say if they did tell us everything, something is a little wrong. There's part of it where they are developing their own private life, and they get to choose about what they share. But the idea is that our door is always open, and that we are always trying to reach for that connection. Whether they choose to accept it or not is up to them, but that we never stop trying. And I mean, I have, like I said, infinite ways, but one of it is to really get into their world and understand, what they like, and ask really open-ended questions like, what's your favorite show these days? Or, where would you want to go if you could go anywhere on, a field trip? And why would you want to go there? And what about if you could make your own rules at school, what would the school rules, how would they change? And kind of like get a deeper understanding for who your child is, and understand and respect whatever it is they say. Now, that doesn't mean you have to agree with it ever, but you respect that these are their thoughts and these are their feelings. So that's a couple ways, as well as, kind of doing the whole love languages thing, which is showing love through their love language. And, just seeing them as their strengths. So a lot of us, especially as parents, we tend to always find what our kids are doing wrong. And that can really break the connection. And what we need to do is figure out what they're doing right. What are their strengths? What are they doing well? And that will just have that child feel less judged and more open to that connection.
Yeah, right. and praise them. But I have just last week I have read the book from Dr. Daniel Amen. Praise them not for who they are, but praise them what they achieved, right? So you don't create a spoiled child either. But what you said about the respect, I find it very one of the most powerful thing, because I remember as a teenager, every time I went to my mom with something I saw as a huge problem, she just dismissed it as like, you will, it will pass until you get married. It's just ridiculized how small my problem was. Just didn't take me seriously. And that's, I can imagine, and what I've lived as well, that stopped me in the future to share anything else with her, right?
Oh, that makes sense, because if you feel like you know what the response is going to be, which is not being met with openness or curiosity, then you do shut down, right?
Yeah, and just take the kids serious, actually. With their problems, even if it seems to us as adults that ridiculous, because we have 2 decades more experiences than they, right? So it could seem to us, to our lens, life experience is ridiculous, but for them, it's a real problem. Just take them seriously. I think treat them with respect. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, yeah. I once got some advice from a parenting class that I was a participant in, which was when my kids were really little. And, you know how when your kids go to a birthday party or, something where they get a circus or something and they get a balloon and you tie it around their wrist, or you say, don't let go. We don't want it to fly up in the sky. And, inevitably there's always the kid who loses their balloon and it flies up in the sky, and then they're all crying. And as parents, we're like, it's just a balloon. Who cares? It's stupid. Stop crying. That's like our almost like immediate gut response. And she said, imagine if that was your phone and your wallet that was flying up into the sky. How sad would you be?
Right.
And I was like, oh, okay. So I always knew that's, I just have to, it's big for them. It might be small for us, but it's big for them. And we need to treat that with the respect that, as if whatever the situation is equally as important as it is to us.
That's it. And we are there where you said, just step into their shoes, right?
Right.
Yeah,
That's all about.
It's all about that.
The empathy and the validation. I mean, that's really what everyone wants, but especially teenagers. They just need that validation that what they're feeling is okay and it's normal and it's acceptable. And, there is that kind of that dismissive parent type that's just like not accepting of big emotions. And they're just like, figure it out. It's your problem. Instead of saying, oh, I'm so sorry. You must be feeling sad about that. And then the thing is, the funny thing is the emotion passes so much quicker when it's validated and met with acceptance than if it's rejected, then it kind of stays stuck.
Right. That's a big one, because in my age, when I was a teenager age, we have to learn how to supreme our emotions and our feelings. It wasn't allowed. If we let our emotions out, it was not as a good behavior. We had to really everything shut down. And I don't know how is it nowadays, actually, but I have clients, they still don't know how to express emotions, and they tell them children as well, because children are doing what they are seeing at home, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, they're it's all about modeling. And so, that's why these things just keep getting passed down, which is why, back to one of your original questions, like, how do we deal with this? And it's really like through self-awareness and a journey as a parent to figure out where you are and really where you want to go and how do you want to be for your children.
Yeah. As a parent or as any adults, you can learn a lot, especially in this emotional intelligence. This is really, really important. Talk about more about the teenagers, because, as I said, there's something big changes happening in their brain when they cross this childhood into this teenagerhood. And we, as adults, we just at least say, yeah, teenagers, they behave or like that, etc. But there is something really on the biological level that's happening. Could you
Totally.
maybe? Yeah.
Yeah, I get what's the word? I get a little protective of teenagers when I hear adults, kind of putting or labeling teenagers as being bad.
Yeah.
Um right? Because they're just doing their job, which is they're growing and they're developing. And so, yeah, there is a lot. Their brain is under construction. So, there's a lot of pruning with all the neurons, but then there's also a lot of growth. And so the brain is just completely rewiring itself from childhood to adulthood. It has to go through this transition. And what's interesting about the teenage brain is it doesn't all grow at the same rate. So it grows more quickly down at the base. And then the last part to fully grow is that prefrontal cortex, which we know is responsible for rational decision making. But what's interesting is the part down here in the limbic system is our emotions. And, that's where our dopamine, our reward system, there's a line, it's, that's where it stems from. And so teenagers are much more likely to do risk seeking behaviors because they're getting such a higher dopamine hit. Like it's like feels even more exciting to them because that having this rush. And so it's like, and the other thing,
because they can't evaluate the risk because their prefrontal cortex is not developed enough to evaluate the risks, right?
Exactly. So it's like they're just dealing with big stuff. And then you add in the hormones in the mix, and then that, it's just big. And that's the thing. And it's sometimes it is, I do as a mom, as a coach, I have my different hats, my coach hat, my mom hat. And sometimes I hear my daughter who, is in high school, and she can be very emotional and very dramatic. And, it's like the smallest thing, like we were talking, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like this is just silly. But I realized, okay, this is what it is. I just have to go with it. And I'm like, join her in. I join her. I really do. When she was telling me about something the other day, I was just like, oh my gosh. And I just match her style and I match her energy and I kind of get in there with her. I'm like, I can't believe it. And I just, and then she's like, yeah, I know. Right. And it's this whole back and forth. And the thing is, then she feels heard. And that's really my goal. And so, it takes a little bit more energy, but really, honestly, it's the joy of my life is to just like being connected with kids and with teenagers, because it's like, they are so fun, and I just, again, it's just like, if you really get to know them, they're amazing and they're fun people to be around.
Yeah. And you said two beautiful things. To connect with them, you match to their energy. Mm-hmm. Again, you were from, you first, you paused from the, oh my God, it's silly. And you paused, you got into the self-awareness, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
You match their energy. And that's the beauty. What that's the connection that happens when the child feels heard and seen and understood.
Completely.
That's where the connection will happen, and they will continue to share with you what's going on in their life.
Right. I mean, think about it, even as an adult, you probably have friendships or family members that you love to share with or tell them exciting news or terrible news, something awful. Like, who's the first person you call? Because that person will meet you with receptivity. They will be open to what it is you say and they'll be supportive. And then there's those people, I'm like, I'm not going to talk to that person about that, because they're just not listening, or they're trying to judge you or change you or dismiss you or whatever that is. It doesn't feel good, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's why everybody needs that. Everybody needs to be heard, to be seen, and to be understood. Everybody needs that. And what we often forget to get what we all need to our teenagers at home. That's the funny thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it just like I think the theme we're saying here a lot is self-awareness. But also I think it's more than that too. It's just like what we're doing right now, this conversation, I hope is like just even educational for some parents, because you don't know this stuff. Like, nobody really teaches you this unless you're really going out of your way to like read a million parenting books. It's not really necessarily obvious, and it's not the way we're naturally wired. It kind of just takes some, concentrated effort and thought and energy on a parent's part or an educator's part to really decide how you want to be and what you're going to do in all these situations.
Yeah, there should be definitely a school for parents in teenager, for parents. For parents, yeah.
Um,
And this is it. This is not something that the teenagers choose to do, to behave like that. We just display it, and I hope everybody who is listening to us and has as a teenager at home is really now aware that there are massive stuff going on, developing and mixing in their brain, and for lots of their behaviors or reaction, even though we may see them as overreaction, this is something that teenager brain can't really control. It's completely out of their hands, and we should be aware of that. It's not completely on them, but the behavior. I'm beautiful. Oh, I love our discussion.
Great, right?
I would like to talk about now the struggles the teenagers have nowadays because of the social contracts and technology toxicity. You were talking about it in your presentation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the social contracts are what we as a society agree upon is acceptable behavior. And that's designed to just keep us safe or keep us civilized. And, an example is, we all agree to drive on well, you're in Europe, so I don't know what side of the road you guys drive on, but we drive on the right side of the road in the United States. And we all agree. And that's the right way to do it for us. And so, we don't crash into each other, or we all agree to not cough on someone's face, right? We all agree we're going to cover our mouth, or, we all have these kind of like rules that we live by just out in society and out in public. And the thing is that, well, another example is like, this is kind of relevant, is like the bathing attire on, a beach or at a swimming pool compared to what it was back in the 1920s, compared to what it is now, is very, very different. And so the thing is, these are like these moving goalposts over time. And the thing is that just recently with the technology and social media, is that these goalposts are moving so quickly that there's actually this almost like breakdown in social contracts, breakdown in society, because we're no longer even treating people, not we as adults, but the teenagers, this is all they know. They're not even treating each other as really humans anymore.
Yeah.
It's this dehumanization where they're just treating each other as objects, like they've completely lost empathy. And that's where that cell phone toxicity comes in, is, there's just a lot of crazy, stories, and I'm sure you've heard of them, is, this bystander culture where kids are getting beat up and other kids are just standing around videoing it and then posting it on social media. No one is trying to help the person who's getting beat up. No one's calling for help. They're not doing anything other than being like entertained by it. So that's kind of like one example. Then there's cyberbullying. That's a big one. We know there was a really sad story just recently of a girl who committed suicide because they videoed her getting actually beat up at school, and then they posted on social media, and she was so humiliated, she took her own life. And so that's the thing. It's like kids are they're lacking like structure and boundaries and respect for each other. And they're not even treating each other as humans anymore. And so that's what this kind of like deterioration of our culture, that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, that's horrible. And I remember you were talking about this dehumanization on teenagers, and in every stories you shared, I was just shocked. And we all know the rate of suicide by teenagers is growing, is still growing. It grew a lot during the COVID, right? Because of this social pressure, isolation, and the cyber bullying or whatever it is. And it's still not going down, right? Because of this, we didn't live in this highly digitalized world in our teenager lives. We can't barely understand what's going on in their brain when living this kind, because as you said, in their teenage brain, the limbic system, which is the center of emotions, they're in wired so high, and when these kind of stuff is happening, they are just crashed, because they seek, as you said, they seek praise and validation and celebration, and all what they get is beating and humiliation and laughing and yeah.
Well, yeah, because when you think about it, the number one thing a teenager wants is to be accepted by their peers or by a social group. So they'll literally do anything, including, ignoring someone who's almost getting killed just to kind of be part of the group or be accepted or be normal or, they're just happy. They're just thankful they're not the one getting beat up, right? It's like, it's just really this almost like survival. They're just surviving, right? It's just it's almost in a way, it's like emotionally barbaric what they're dealing with.
So what should we do I might know the answer, but I want the answer from you, of course. So what should we do as a and now I take it as a society, or maybe we should do it at school, or what should we do?
I really do think it's a group effort, a team effort. I have found that parents seem to want this to be the school's responsibility, and I've observed that school wants the parents to take more responsibility. But then there's also, the government. What is their role as far as like laws about, we know, in the U.S. we have laws about bullying and how it's reported to the school, things like that. But it really is taking a collaborative effort, because the thing is, social media is not going away and technology is not going away. So the first step, in my opinion, is just to accept that it's here to stay. We cannot stop that. But what we can have control over, it's like what we have no control over versus what we do have control over. And it is to educate parents and to have the schools, ironically, to educate the schools on what these social issues are. Because I feel like the schools, ever since COVID, they're still in survival mode. They're still in recovery mode, because they're still dealing with the aftermath of the kids who were really suffering then. So it just, from all the schools and all the parents I've talked to about this issue, it just feels a little bit like we're drowning. Like it feels like there's not a lot of help. And that honestly is now kind of, I've taken that as part of my job to do education on this, so that schools and parents can learn more about what's happening and how we need to be more on top of our kids, have more of those boundaries in place for our kids, be more aware of what's on our kids' phone. What are they looking at? Who are they talking to? What is their social media apps? How many hours a day are they on them? All those things. Like we kind of just hand when our kid gets a phone for their birthday or Christmas, whenever that is, we're like, here you go. And they open the box and they set it up themselves. Like there's so many parents that don't know all the steps and tools to put in kind of the monitoring and, the screen time and all those things. Some do. I do know a lot that do, but there's also, many that don't.
Yeah, and as you said, it's a time to cooperate, like school and parents, instead of shooting or giving up the responsibility like a hot potato, right?
That's exactly how it seems. That's what it seems like. Nobody wants to really deal with it because it's so big and so out of control.
Yeah.
So it really takes everybody to join in together.
Yeah, and you talk about the controlling of their how many time they spend on the social media and gaming and whatever. Would it be also good to educate teenagers what are the dangers, and what's about the emotional intelligence and this kind of stuff, how to react when this kind of message happens, etc.
I think it is helpful. What I have found just in my work is that it is better to start at a younger age as far as the education. And, I know in our schools here, they do teach some, cyber etiquette or whatever that might, digital, responsibility, things like that. They do have some of that, but I think that's at the schools. I think it would be helpful to have the parents be involved in that as well. Honestly, I feel like if you're teaching that to your teenager for the first time, it's a little late. They're already, involved in it, or all their friends are already involved in it. And at that point, you couldn't give them enough scientific facts for them to care. They won't care because teenagers, like we said, they don't make decisions with their rational brain. They make it with their emotional brain. So the idea, if you are going to influence a teenager specifically, is to influence and appeal to their emotions. And that's the thing is, while their emotions are telling them they want to be included, they want to be part of stuff. They don't want FOMO. They don't want to be left out. So really, I think like I said, it takes an earlier age to let them know, it's not, here in the United States, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends no more than 1 to 2 hours per day on technology. Well, the ironic part about that is they're on technology all day at school because that's how they learn. All their assignments are on their computers.
That's the thing. That's the thing. And I have learned recently that teenagers starting at age 17, they are developing something that's called digital dementia. Because they are too much and they start too early with digital medias, with iPhones, etc. And that for preserving the functional, the healthy functional of brain, they shouldn't deal with any digital devices up to the age of 13. And this is exactly the age where the brain starts to change, to develop in these teenagers. So that's interesting that it's not only in US, but here in Europe as well. We are bringing digital devices to schools from the age 6 already. So they are already exposed, and we are even not aware that we are damaging their brain. And we are not teaching nothing about the social media and this kind of stuff.
And what's interesting about that, the irony actually is that technology kind of saved our kids during COVID because they were doing online school. And so it was either that or don't learn at all or have no access to learning. So that is the irony, because it did bring the connection. It brought the teachers in class together. It gives the assignments online. So they are still able to learn through that. And so that's where it's like, for me, a little bit of a quagmire. I don't know if that word translates for you, but an unsolvable puzzle, because in some ways, kids are able to learn more quickly because of the access that they have, but it's the amount of time they are spending on the devices. And I think also, it's partially how they're using them. So, I've read research that shows people who are passive on social media, and by passive, I mean just scrolling through, scroll, has a much more unhealthy outcome, much more risk of suicide, not suicide, but probably suicide, depression, anxiety. Whereas if you're actively socializing, you're actively posting, you're commenting, it's more of a connection, and there is like a social benefit to that. So like I said, it's all a balance, but we're just in an age where this is kind of how it is. And so we just have to decide, how much is too much. And the thing is, part of it is just as an individual family, you have to decide what's right for you and what's right for your kids. And I'm never going to tell other people what to do. I can give them the research or show them what I've learned, but that's all I can really do.
Yes, of course. The decision is always by the parents from the teenagers. What we can provide is only the studies and proofs, and the decision will always end up by the parents. And we are heading for the end. It's an amazing discussion. For the last, I would like to ask you, what would you recommend to parents they struggle with their child, either behavior or their child struggling with anxiety or depression because of social media, or they don't even know? Just the first steps that the parents should do.
There's multiple things. A lot of times I've seen parents, they want to use the phone as the punishment or reward system. Like, I'm going to take your phone away, or they use it as threats. Sometimes they follow through, sometimes they don't. And honestly, I don't feel like that's a great method, to be quite honest. I think there are, ways you can earn things, but as in general, if your child is spending 6 hours a day on social media, you to have a conversation with them and you say, I've observed this isn't good for you, blah, 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 have a conversation, and then don't take it away completely, cut it in half, go down to 3 hours, then go down to 2 hours, and just kind of like try to wean them off of it a little bit. And then also it's like, what do you do with those extra hours? They used to be just laying around scrolling on their phone. Go do something with your kid. Take them, go play with them, go hang out, go whatever it is that you are connecting, and don't just say, hey, entertain yourself. And I get that. I'm so busy as a mom. I don't a lot of times have the ability, but it's like they have to, whenever you take away a behavior, you have to replace it with something. And so it's better to replace it with something that they might find enjoyable, and they'll more likely see the benefit of that.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So for last, where parents, when they need a guidance, can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am on Facebook and Instagram, and my website is all the same name. It's all Positively Healthy Coaching. So that's how people can find me.
Yeah, I will make sure put your links to my post, so the parents and teenagers, they felt inspired and would need help will contact you. It was an amazing. Thank you so much, Laura. It was a splendid interview. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So this show can also be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out the www.spanglishword.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish Word, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thank you very much.